Hello, my name is Lylanthia, and today we are going to be reading the chapter Fire from the series Dual Nature Reflections, written by Ava Altair. If you find that you like this, please check her out on Patreon at patreon.com/Ava Altair, with a link in the description below. Additionally, she can be found on Twitter at AltairAva, and on Facebook as Ava Altair as well, and her Amazon profile page where you can find all of her published works. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the experience. The morning brought with it another thunderstorm. Deep rumbling shook the house through the wee hours, waking Theodore. He lay on the mattress pad, counting the seconds between flashes and thunder until a particularly bright flash lit from both the window and the hall, followed by an immediate boom that had Theodore's heart jumping in his throat. A squeak escaped from the bed as the deep rumble of lightning rolled over the house. Theodore jumped to his feet and peered out the window. The backyards of neighboring houses were dark, hinting the power had been knocked out. In the distance, a neighbor's tree blazed with fire, lighting the dark yard. Bits of tree branches hung in shadows around the base as it burned. "Whoa," Theodore whispered. Kai stood at his elbow and leaned over the dresser to look. "Whoa," he echoed. Kai's arm brushed his as he braced against the dresser for support. That thick, sweet smell of Kai filled his nose, waking more of his body. Theodore leaned closer to the window, using it as an excuse to get closer to Kai. He let his arm rest against Kai's. Kai's arm was cold as he pressed. He could feel him shaking. "Are you okay?" Theodore asked. Kai wrenched his eyes from the burning tree that was slowly being doused by the battering waves of rain. "What? Oh, it's just the adrenaline. I was dead asleep when it hit." "But why are you so cold?" Kai shrugged. "It takes me a while to get warm after being out in the cold all day. Even after a bath." Kai's eyes narrowed. "Is that weird?" Theodore thought about it a moment. He couldn't remember a time where he'd spent hours out in the cold. He'd been cold before, but not anything serious. His answer was a shrug. "I guess not." Kai's eyes returned to the burning tree. Another strike of lightning followed by a loud thunderstrike made them both jump. Kai was pressing against his arm. Theodore could feel him shake. When the thunder cleared, Theodore asked, "Was the thunder bad on the way here?" Kai ducked his head away from Theodore. "It was pretty violent." Theodore rested a careful hand on Kai's shoulder. He could feel Kai's shiver through his body. Another flash of lightning, followed by a peal of thunder as Kai had practically jumped out of his skin. Theodore's arm tightened around his shoulders. The thunder continued rumbling through the house, and to Theodore's surprise, Kai leaned into him. Another crack surprised them both, which had Kai pressed tightly against Theodore's chest, and he closed his arms around Kai's small frame. Kai tucked his head into Theodore's shoulder. Another peal of thunder, and Theodore held Kai against him as a shiver ran the length of Kai's body. He was still impossibly cold. Theodore sucked in a musky breath of Kai's sweet scent and felt a shiver of his own run through his body. Kai lifted his head. "Are you cold too? You don't feel cold." "Here." Kai pulled at Theodore's arm and climbed into the bed. Another long rumble of thunder had Kai pulling Theodore next to him. Theodore draped his arms around him as Kai tucked his body firmly against him. The storm raged outside, sending waves of rain and broken branches against the side of the house. Theodore found himself nuzzling the top of Kai's head as Kai tightened his arms around Theodore's waist. Slowly the storm passed, and Kai's rhythmic breath pulsed against Theodore's bare chest. Theodore leaned back in the pillows, pulling Kai with him. He tossed the covers back around them and lay quietly in the dark with Kai snuggled on his shoulder. Kai was cold and seemed to be pulling the heat right out of him. Theodore's hand traced Kai's side, smoothing the t-shirt down along him. There was a little bit of curve in Kai's side before his hand rose to rest on his hip. Again, the question of gender flickered through his mind. His body responded, and he tilted away from Kai. His hand slid away from his hips quickly back to his shoulder. Male, female, 13 or older. The evidence flashed through his mind, his scent, his movement, and his voice. He looked down at Kai's sleeping face in the near dark. His finger trailed from Kai's shoulder to his cheek, following the edges of his jaw. Her jaw? He very well could be holding a girl in his arms right now. Either way, he was holding Kai. His heart fluttered. He was holding Kai like this, close to him, pressed against him. He was protecting him from the outside world. For a moment he lost himself in the sweet face, and before he knew it, he was pressing a kiss to Kai's forehead. He pulled back. What had he just done? What if Kai was a boy? Theodore brushed a lock of hair from Kai's face, drawing a sleepy sigh from Kai's lips. Theodore's eyes were immediately drawn to them. He wished there was more light so he could see the perfect curve of the Cupid's bow on that pink lip. At the moment, he ached to feel them. His fingers trembled. His thumb gently brushed the full lips. He stared as they softly caressed his rough thumb pad, shifting it as he moved across the bottom one. They were so impossibly soft. Theo? Kai asked, his sleepy voice and barely a whisper. His lips moved just beneath his thumb. His tongue kissed it with the breath of his name. Theodore's throat went dry. He had been caught. He grappled for words and heavy, yes, breathed out of his own. You don't smell like skunk anymore. Kai nestled deep in Theodore's side. Theodore paused. What? He smelled like skunk? And he didn't anymore? He took a sniff of his own armpit. He didn't think it smelled that bad. Kai? Kai slid his fingers across Theodore's bare chest, igniting a fire deep inside him. Kari, silly. Kari, Theodore whispered. He liked the way it rolled off his tongue. Kari. Kai, or maybe it was Kari, slid his/her fingers back under her chin, resting it gently on his chest. He, or again maybe she, was fast asleep. Theodore tucked a lock of hair behind Kai's ear. Kari, he whispered, is that who you really are? He racked his brain. The name seemed so familiar. Where had he heard it? It was right there in the corner of his mind. Cassie? Carrie? No, Karina. Kai's older sister, and that awkward conversation Master had when Kai first arrived flashed through his mind. Then all the sly smiles Master had given him when it came to Kai. He knew the whole time. That bastard. Kai was Karina. Well, Kari, he guessed. Kai was a girl. He looked down at Kai with fresh eyes. Of course she was a girl. Well, sort of. Well, maybe not so obvious, he guessed. She wasn't curvy and had no hips. He wondered how old she was. He blinked. He was holding a girl. He had just kissed a girl on the forehead. His heart raced, his body heated, and it was all he could do to stay still. He'd barely even seen girls his age, let alone talked to one. He was always so busy, and they were always into the bigger guys. And yet, here she was, right here in his arms. The perfect girl. Probably. He was 90% sure she was a girl now, but there could still be a chance he was wrong. That sweet, musky smell assaulted his nose once again. His insides tightened with desire, and despite his doubt, his body knew better. He twisted away from Kai quickly, lest he actually touch her like that. She mumbled as he turned away and faced the wall. It had suddenly gotten so hot. He pressed his now free hands against the wall to cool off. Theodore took a few deep breaths. That's what he wanted, right? For Kai to be a girl? But that was only a hope, and now it was real. He didn't know what to do. A small hand draped over his side, and suddenly a small frame pressed into his back. And was that breasts? They were touching him. Maybe that was his imagination. If they were, then they were a bit small. But his body grew harder at the thought. Kai's hand slid down his chest. Theodore caught it in his own. He wasn't sure what else to do, so he lay still, letting the sleeping Kai lean against him and hold him tight. After a time, he laced his fingers with hers and relaxed against her embrace. Slowly, his consciousness faded, and he slept soundly. Thank you for listening. This was the chapter Fire from Ava Altair's Patreon. You can find and subscribe to her at Ava Altair on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Ava, spelled AVA, Altair, spelled ALTAIR. Thank you very much for watching, and if you like the video, feel free to subscribe, drop us a like, and of course, sharing on any social media is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful day and stay tuned for more.